All right, yeah. So welcome to CIT225 in a new term. Hopefully you all had a wonderful break. Um, it's always kind of nice. I don't know, to get back in the groove, but while it doesn't ever seem long enough, it's always kind of nice to get back in the groove. But anyways, just so you know, want to do some quick housekeeping. And they should all be in the announcements as well, but just kind of want to reiterate. So I kind of like to run the class as if it were kind of like a work environment. So, typically what you would do at work is kind of like what I would expect here. I accept late work, but I just ask if you know in advance. I mean, obviously we all have emergencies, but if you have things that come up and things are going to be a little later or something, just feel free to communicate those in advance. Ultimately, my main goal is to make sure that everyone just does well in the class. So really that's my end goal. So obviously I want to make sure that you stay up to date on kind of like what you're supposed to be getting done, because obviously procrastination is never going to bode well. So anyways, I just kind of ask that stay up to date on things, but obviously if you need that, I do accept late work. And pretty easy, pretty easy going is what I like to think. So anyways, into kind of what we want to do here in this class is we are going to learn about databases. And I guess just for another show of hands, for those of you here, how many of you have taken CIT 111?
What's the name of CIT 111? I don't remember by number.
It is what's it called? I think it's Introduction to Databases. Yeah, I see a hand up and one yes, two yeses. Perfect. So anyways, CIT 111, I always get asked like, oh, I didn't take 111. Is this going to be too hard? And the answer is no. If you took 111, it certainly will be easier. Like by far will be like just a little bit quicker up the curve is what I would describe it. But just so you know, I always like to kind of start I like to kind of just start from the ground up. That way, if everyone's kind of on the same page, we're all kind of starting from the same kind of place. So if you've kind of done this before, or if things seem a little redundant, I apologize. But I think it'll be better, and hopefully things are less reviewy for you, and you can do a little bit more at the end of the day, just because you're building up to it. All right. So what we're gonna do is let's kind of jump in and start talking about the actual course just a little bit. So what I want to do is let me pull up Canvas here. So I'll just show you this. Basically, each week we have kind of like the same format every week, which is really handy. And basically every week, and I'm going to use week 2 as an example, because week 1 we have a couple extra things. So we'll look at week 2. So basically each week you're going to have some reading and some preparation, which is really loosely kind of based. We'll talk about that more in a minute, because we kind of deep dive into each one of these things. So preparation and reading, it has like a help each other devotional. This isn't graded or required. So it's just kind of there. Feel free to use it if you want. I prefer Teams. So that's why I set up Teams, because it's faster. We can all talk much faster over Teams than this. So I pretty much just like, I don't ignore these, but no one ever uses them because we have the Teams. So you have your reading. We have an exercise, which is more kind of like it's in quiz form, but it's more like practice with actual kind of like the actual doing things. And then we have a quiz. Once a week, we just have a little quiz. And then each week we have kind of like a paper or / project. We'll talk a little bit about that as we deep dive. But real quick, just kind of want to go over the reading. So I don't want you to be daunted when you click on the reading because it is big. Quite a list of things to read. Week 1, it has 2 chapters worth of reading. What people always look at is all these links, and they say, oh, do I have to read all this? And the answer is really no. This is really here for your benefit, so you can kind of like pick and choose. So what I always tell people is I would start with the paper, look at the paper and let it kind of guide your studies, so to speak. I mean, and then obviously read the book. The book is actually quite good. You can access it electronically for free if you don't have a physical copy or don't mind to not have a physical copy. But inside the reading, every week there's this PowerPoint, and these PowerPoints are actually really handy. So this is, like I said, I would start with the paper to kind of like give me direction, just to make sure there's nothing like, so you kind of know what to look for. Because as we go through the paper, you'll want to look for things to pull from your studies to use in your paper. So that's why I say I always like to have like point B plotted out. So look at the paper, and then that way you kind of know where point B is, and then start the reading. That way when you see keywords or things, you can say, hey, oh, I'm going to pull that in, save this, jot it down in my notes, etc. But these PowerPoints really cover in great summary the kind of content for the week. So I often will kind of like go through this on some of the more like complicated things to talk through. This week is pretty standard. It talks a lot about like installing things. It walks you through it. There's also video tutorials all over the place, so you can kind of get installed and get set up. So that's pretty much like the exercise this week is really just getting installed. Really, week 1 is really just about getting installed and up and running.
So I had a question on the paper. When I was looking at the paper, it looked like, it kind of talks about hierarchical databases, relational databases, and kind of gets into things. But then at the very end, the question was very narrow. It said, write 3 to 5 paragraphs on the command line, basically, and didn't really cover the other. So can you write 3 to 5 paragraphs on all of the stuff that we learned this week, or is it specifically just the command line?
So yeah, it's pretty open-ended. That's kind of what I would say is I like to kind of leave it really open-ended to kind of let you guys drive your own kind of studies. Now, I have an example of a week 1 paper that I did to kind of help, because people always ask. So this is what I would consider to be like a good paper. As you can see, there's not like a ton of writing involved. I don't care about format at all. I've had some students that just build web pages. Whatever, feel free. If you like using Markdown, whatever. As long as I can read it and grade it, that's really all that matters, and can get to the whatever you insert here. So anyways, this is an example of a week 1 paper. So you can kind of get the idea. It really is just a few paragraphs. So this one I did 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs, and a couple screenshots. Really, to me, the best thing to do is to like really just like highlight like what you did to self-learn. That, to me, that's what the deep understanding is. And they kind of frame it around this like, oh, pretend you're in this work environment or whatever. Like, if that helps you, great. But really, for me, it's more about like, this is your chance to kind of journal like what you learned, explain your own thoughts in a way that makes sense to you, or just simply kind of like show because there's always a prompt, kind of like provide evidence to back it up, because I would use the paper as a way to kind of say like, oh, what is the difference between the command line and the GUI? Like maybe I should try the same thing in both places and see what happens. So that's kind of like what I view the paper as, is it's more of a way to kind of document that. And I like it to be, I'm glad that it's kind of loose ended, because it really allows, students to kind of do what they want. And in fact, I really kind of like got this concept when I was doing my master's, because it's really the first time I encountered like open-ended stuff. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, is I'm sure you guys know, like when you don't have very specific instructions, you're always worried like, oh, am I meeting the requirements? Because we all want to do good. And so it makes us not very happy when, we can't like tick the boxes, so to speak. So that's kind of the con to it, but the pro is like it really allows you to kind of go directions that interest you. And it's funny because I see like I read all these papers, and it's really interesting to see like, even though everyone gets the same prompt, just the variety of opinions and topics, and the idea is that you provide the evidence, your evidence for what you are proposing, and so they're all valid for the most part. And so anyways, I really like the open-ended papers.
Yeah, that's helpful. Because when I was reading the question, it would seem like provide the evidence that the command line is faster, and your boss says that's better and it's going to be more productive. So, but to me, it's like there's pros and cons to everything, like you're saying, right? Like the GUI does offer some pros that the command line doesn't have. So if we can talk about both, I think it'd be a little easier, more balanced than specifically trying to hit the target of the one question that they're asking or whatever.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I would say. In fact, if you were to read this paper, you'll see that basically I do the same thing. At the end of the day, I say they both have their pros and cons, is essentially what I say at the end of the day. So anyways, let's see. So anyways, that's the paper. So paper, so like, just like you were talking about, the paper, 3 to 5 paragraph. I always tell people pictures worth 1,000 word, not necessarily like a whole paragraph. But I kind of like to see, if you write a little bit of code, like every week, we should probably be at least trying what we're learning. So, screenshot it, throw it in, because we'd love to get it. Yeah. All right, let's see here. And then there is this rubric, but it's pretty basic. Like really the only thing that I see people get docked for is they'll wait till the last second to write it, and they'll do like, 2-sentence paragraphs. So, I think we all pretty much know like when the effort's there or not, and it's very apparent to me when I'm grading them. So I would just say, now you don't need to go overboard. That's the other thing I see frequently, is some people will write like these huge extensive things. You don't need to do that. It just needs to be a nice little summary. Be concise, just say, this is, just hit the dots, provide some evidence, and call it a day. Because I don't want it to take it shouldn't take you an hour to do this, as long as you're, I guess, depending on how you go about it. Like to me, if you read the thing and you go through the reading and kind of pull from it while you're doing that in your exercises, like putting it together should take 10 to 15 minutes. So nothing too crazy.
Do you personally grade these, or do they go to the grading bank? I know some classes have grading banks.
I grade those. I like to read them. So
okay.
Because I kind of use them to see what I missed. That's the one nice thing. That's why I really like the papers, is because it's almost easier to find like where I've missed some gaps, or where maybe like the curriculum doesn't quite cover as well. So yeah, great questions. yeah, anyways, week one is really, and then like the quiz and the exercises, week one's a little different because it's really just about installing. But like I'll preview these exercises. It says write the SQL statement that retrieves this, and there's lots of really good examples in the book and stuff. So that's an example of the exercises. It's really just like, oh, write a little query that does this, provide an example of that, it's etc. And then the quizzes are more like multiple choice. So these ones are graded by the computer. I will be upfront that there are some questions that are a little weird. And so if you come across a little weird one, all I would say is like try to do your due diligence, because I get plenty of like, oh, I don't think I got this wrong, but we talk through and it's fine. So I would say just do your due diligence. If you get one wrong and you're wondering why, maybe go look and see. But there are some that are a little weird, and I try to catch every term I go through in advance and try to catch them. But sometimes they slip because they don't get corrected for some reason in between terms. And like another kind of example, sometimes there'll be questions like this where you'll run this, but that it may be a different version. Like, don't put false because like the versions change like every month. So as long as it's like the same kind of format, like on stuff like this, then you should be good. All right. And if you ever have like a problem, like I said, like I like to treat it like a workplace, so it's not like super rigid. So if you ever have like a question or concern with a question, feel free just to shoot me a ping on Teams. But anyways, that's kind of it. And format of the class. Does anyone have any questions?
Hey, this is Amy. I do have a question about the command line. I was just having a really hard time pulling it up, but I'm actually in my church parking lot waiting for my kids to get picked up for youth activity. Otherwise, I'd share my screen to show you my issue. But what happens, like when I can see that my command line thing is saved, but I can't seem, when you open it up and then there's that screen where you can like type in commands, I can't get that to pull up. So I'm like, okay, did it download wrong? So I already had all of this SQL, Workbench, server, etc. on my computer from previous classes. I thought, well, I better do a download again just to make sure I have the most up to date, make sure I'm updated and everything. So I'm not sure if I messed something up, because I was just fine on my Workbench, because as I read through the chapters this week, I played along, on my Workbench, everything's working fine, but I can't get that command line to come up. I'm not sure what I've done wrong.
Got it. Yeah. And let me see. I'm trying to get
I can see it in my list of programs, but I can't get it to open up, like where you can type things in.
yeah, and there it gets a little weird, and I have a shortcut that I like to use. I'm guessing you're on Windows.
Yes, I am.
Okay. Yeah, there's a little shortcut. Let me see if I can get Workbench open here real quick. Um, okay, for some reason it's blocking me.
One thing I wondered is could I, when you get the command line, is that, because I know when we downloaded the Workbench and the server, that it was kind of all like a little cluster. Is there a way to, so I could uninstall it and reinstall just the command line to see if then it would work?
Yeah, I think you could go through that process. just like the same like process. And I think there's a way you can, because uninstalling the database gets a little weird on Windows, I'll be honest. But there is a way you can just kind of like go through the installation process again. And I think it kind of like, but yeah, basically does a reinstall. The one thing that gets a little weird is if you forget like your root kind of username.
For sure, I know I did because I set that up so long ago. And when I did the update, just saved it and everything's saved. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't know that I could remember it. That is my problem.
Yeah, so I would what I would say is try going through that installation process. Because it may just like have you reset it up. Is my bet.
Okay. Yeah, because I just felt like I couldn't write the paper until I played around on it. I'm like, can't get it. This is so frustrating. So I'll try that tonight or tomorrow, and then I'll holler at you if I'm still stuck. Is that okay?
Yes. Yep, for sure. Yeah, and like I said, like the biggest thing is to like this week we're just trying to really get like up and running. So the biggest thing is just like if you run into any issues, we really want to just make sure that we get installed this week. Let's see.
So I had mine set up too from last semester, and then the PowerPoint said, set up first connection. So I did that. So I have local root and first connection. They both seem to work and do the same thing. Is that going to cause a problem down the road, or is it fine to have both?
Yeah, it should be fine to have both.
Okay.
So I actually had some. Oh, you go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, so I had a question about the PowerPoint. I already had MySQL as well as Workbench installed from last semester too. Do we need to install MySQL shell in addition to that? I can use MySQL on the command line. I was having some problems with it, but I created a path so that I could use the MySQL command, but I still can't get MySQL sh, the MySQL sh command to function for me.
Yeah, so Windows, unless you add it to your path, it gets a little weird. So you can install the shell if you want, but the easiest way is actually just to do this little shortcut. So let me just start my database here. So let's see, SQL. So anyways, I'm gonna do mine here. So let's see if I can SQL-u root-p. Okay. So anyways, we're going to start diving down this just a little bit. So yeah, so this is MySQL in and of itself. So a lot of people get confused. So MySQL is actually the database, and in this class we run it on our computers, and it's a service. So it kind of just runs in the background. It's kind of like something that just kind of happens in the background, and then we use one of these two tools to kind of connect to it. So in this case, like this one, we have MySQL here that's up and running. And I'm actually going to delete this connection, because we'll create a new. So when you open up MySQL Workbench, this is what it should look like. And we can hit this little plus here, and I'm just going to call this one CIT225. And all this should be the same. Now, like I said, it's running on our computer, so localhost 127.0.0.1. And then whatever you kind of set up your passwords as. So I'm going to test my connection. So mine is not working. So now I'm going to say okay, because it's going to. Oh, for some reason it's not liking my password here. Edit connection. Somewhere there's here we can. I'm not sure what my password is here. Just like you guys, because I just set it up. So we'll see what it does here. Okay, well, we're gonna cheat and we're just gonna do a new one because I can log in here. This is what's nice about command line. So just for the sake of time, because we could fix this. So I'm gonna do, and we do this in week 1. So once you kind of get connected, just so you know, when you connect for the first time, what you can do is you can right click here and say start command line client. So if we right click here, say start command line client, it's going to come here and ask for a password. So I'm going to throw one in. Mine isn't working for some reason, because for whatever reason, it never asked me what it was, because I just installed today. So anyways, I'm gonna reset that password here in just a minute. But for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new user. So I'm going to say create user, and I'm just going to do Tanner at, I'll let myself connect from everywhere, identified by, I'll do School Rocks. So that just created my user, and now I'm going to grant all privileges to Tanner at everywhere. But grant all privileges on star.star. Up. And I typoed. Privileges. There we go. All right, so basically I just created my new user. It has you do one in the instructions as well. So I'm going to delete this connection, create a new one. And in this case, I'm going to put in my username here. Test the connection. School Rocks was my password. We're connected and need to give it a name. There we go. All right, so now, you should be to this point by default. Once you do it, it'll probably be root or whatever, but we should be the same point now. So once you have your connection here, we can right click, and like I said, if you can't get to the command line with the actual command, it's because it's not in your path. Basically, it doesn't know the nickname for it. So what I always like to do is just open up Workbench, right click here and say start command line client. And then again, you'll just type in that School Rocks password and we're connected. So that's like kind of my little shortcut, because to be honest, we're going to be in Workbench probably 98% of the time, if not more. So yeah, that again, just to show you, just right click here, start command line client, punch in whatever password you set when you did the install, and you should be good to go. Now, if you forgot your password, I think that there is, when you go to reinstall, if you are the admin of your computer, it'll just ask you to reset it, I think. So anyways, and real quick, just kind of want to show you around just a little bit. So when you first get into Workbench, so I just double clicked on that connection. This is what it looks like. It's really just like a code editor that we've probably all seen before. On the left-hand side, it's got like server status, users and privileges, all that kind of stuff. So here's my root. Oh, and see, no password is set for this account. So I bet you I probably could have just hit return and it would have been fine, because it doesn't have a password. Or we can set one here. So that's probably what I did wrong, and I installed a little differently. So, but over here, you can see it kind of like some administration type stuff. But really, what we want to see is a way to kind of browse our information. So these little arrows up here, we can click to the right, and you'll see right now we just have this sys schema. And this just stands for system. And by default, if you follow the instructions, you should have a Sequila database as well. Now, I purposely kind of didn't have one here because I kind of wanted to walk through what you do if you don't, because for some, you may not, like if you've already installed, you know, it may not be there for you. So the nice thing is it's super easy to get. So if you just Google Sequila MySQL database, first link will take you here to the Sequila sample database. You can go to installation, and then right here that has a little link to where you can download it. So I'm going to download the Sequila database in zip format, and it will download. So there it is. So here it is in my folder here, my downloads folder. So I'm going to extract it here, and you know, here's our files. So now what's really nice is, you know, there's a couple different things here. We have the MWB, which is actually a Workbench model. So MySQL Workbench.mwb MySQL Workbench. We'll talk about that next week. But really the two that we need to kind of create our database, if you don't already have them, are these two, the schema and the database. And the reason why I like to kind of go through this process is because I think it helps highlight kind of how these databases are set up at a very high level before we, you know, hurt our brains. But anyways, if I go back to Workbench, what I'm going to do is, now that I've extracted those, is I'm actually going to open those SQL scripts. So I'm going to say open. I'm going to go to my downloads, and the first thing I'm going to do is open the schema one. And what the schema does, you'll hear this word schema. I like to equate it to like a house, right? So whenever we build a database is filled with these objects, and the most notorious being a table. You know, tables are something we are all familiar with. We've all seen Excel spreadsheets. Those are tables. You know, rows and columns, pretty simple. But when we define them in a database, we have to designate like very specific things. So really we kind of create like objects, because we have to very clearly define columns and what kind of data type it is and what's allowed there. We can be really restrictive. We've all seen the thing like where, you know, you're filling out something and it says like, oh, this has to be a number, not letters. And it's because maybe in the database, it doesn't allow the storage of letters in a specific field. So anyways, the schema in this case is, like I said, I like to equate it to the house, and it's the structure, right? So it's the frame, not necessarily the content. So that's why it's called the schema. So you'll hear the word schema. It's synonymous with a database, but really what makes up the database is the schema of all the objects that comprise it. So anyways, once we're here, we just need to run this. And so all we have to do, so up here, there's a couple buttons. So there's these two little lightning bolts. One has a little cursor and the other one doesn't. So the cursor one will run whichever statement the cursor's on. So if my cursor's here, it's just going to run this first one. If we run the one without the cursor, it's going to run whatever we highlight or the whole thing. So I'm just going to click this, and it's actually going to do its stuff. Let's see if I can pull this up. You can see it actually did a bunch of stuff. And so now what I'm going to do, once I run that, I'm going to go over here. And there's either this little button up here, or you can right click and say refresh. I like to just right click and say refresh because this little button's teeny. But once I do that, you'll notice, hey, look, there's a new schema here, and it's Sequila, and we have tables. And anyways, if we look at this, I can select rows from here, but the problem is they're all empty. So by default, all these tables are empty because, like I said, we built the house, but we didn't put any of the furniture, any of the content, the actual data inside. We just built the structure for it to live in. So the next thing we need to do is open the other script, which is Sequila data. And we're going to do that same thing. So we're going to click the lightning bolt up here, It's going to run, and it actually puts all the data in. It takes just a minute. In fact, you can kind of see it taking its toll here on my computer. So it's doing its thing. Hopefully it makes it. All right, I think it's done. So now if we were to right click here and select rows from Sequila.actor, we can see that there's data in there now. So anyways, that is how you kind of can get all your data in there. You just got to run those 2 scripts. So if for whatever reason something happens, because sometimes I do, don't worry, because we just use this sample data and it's all right there. So anyways, those are those 2 scripts. Now, real quick before we go, just real quick, want to just cover a little bit about the GUI and kind of how you can navigate command line, because like you'll read in your paper, and it's okay to have a preference, because like I said, we're going to be in Workbench 98% of the time. I think it's a great tool for learning. However, in the workplace, you're bound and determined at some point to use command line, because like I said, these servers are there, and there's some things that just don't work in Workbench, even though MySQL is very specific to itself with Workbench, like same product built for it essentially. There's just some things that won't work in Workbench. You have to do them kind of in a script or via command line. So it's just good to know. So anyways, if we're going to start from scratch, let's just go straight back to our little house here. So, you know, the first thing we got to do, because like I said, these are both tools just to connect to our database and interact with it. So the first thing we need to do is connect. So I'm just going to right click on this. This is how we log in on the GUI, which is our graphical user interface. So anyways, I just logged in. That simple. On command line, we can do it like this. We say MySQL-U root-p. And in this case, you know, I don't have a password set. So I need to use my other user. So Tanner Crook, or it was just Tanner, and then -p, and my password was School Rocks, and we're logged in. So we're at the same points now. Now, if I want to examine, you know, oh, what tables do I have? Whenever I get to a new database, the first thing you want to do is kind of see like what tables there are. Now, like I said, the GUI has its benefits, because we can just click this little caret and kind of see all the tables. In Workbench, we can do show tables. And you'll notice when I hit return, it'll do this little arrow thing, and you'll think, oh, I'm stuck. Well, it's because we need to do a semicolon. So as soon as we do the semicolon, it'll end the command. But you'll notice it says, hey, no database selected. And that's because we have 2. We have Sequila and Sys. And so it says, which database do you want to see data from? And in this case, we want to do Sequila. So we say use Sequila, semicolon. And now we can do show tables. And there we go. So just like in the GUI, we had to click on Sequila before we could show the tables. We have to do the same thing here. We have to use Sequila and then show the tables. But once we do that, you'll notice that the list is identical. So it's just a little bit different format, you know. And so from here, let's say we say, okay, well, let's look at the actor table. What do we have here? So we can click down and then click on columns, and we have some basic data. We have actor ID, first name, last name, and last update date. So to do the same thing here, I can say describe actor. And again, we kind of have that same thing. Now, this is one area where I actually like the view command prompt, because you just get a little bit more information than you do right here. Not saying we can't get it here, because we can, but I just really like this view. It's nice, clear, concise. You can see what the field name is, the data type. Null means like, can it be empty? So in this case, like if we were filling out a form, we'd have to fill in all the fields. If there's any default value, so like if I leave last update empty, it'll just fill it with whatever the current timestamp is. And then any extra configuration. And then finally, just so you can kind of start exploring a little bit, the last thing you can do, or the last thing I'll show you here, is how to just like view the data in the table. Now, like I said, especially for learning, Workbench is really nice because I can just right click on the actor table and say select rows. And it limits it to the top 1,000, which should be, I don't think there's any tables that have more than 1,000 records in this, but we do that so you don't get a ton. Especially like, if you're dealing with like a trillion row table, you don't want to select it all because that's resources and stuff. So it's pretty common to just select the first 1,000 rows. But anyways, here's the data, and you can kind of view it. So let's do the same thing in here. And you'll notice when we do that, it actually gives us the code right there. So now when we go here, I'm just going to paste this in and we get the data. So, pretty similar, just kind of two different ways to go about it. So anyways, there's kind of like an intro into kind of like what your paper will be on. And like I said, the focus this week is really just get installed, get to this point. If you have any issues at all, like feel free to reach out. Don't, knock your head against the wall too long. Because like I said, this week is all about just getting set up and ready to go. We want everyone ready. So that way next week, we're just ready to roll. Cool. Does anyone have any questions?
I got a question that's not directly to anything we read around this class, but like that last command line you just did where you selected the rows. I was trying to research how to put that to a text file, and it said like to use the right arrow thing, but can you show how you just throw that to a text file from a command line or Excel file or anything else?
Yes. So like if you just like wanted to dump this to
select star from actors and then just dump it to a text file.
Yes. So yeah, there's a couple different ways we can dump it. You can dump the actual output. But like most of the time we're going to want to kick it out to like something like a CSV,
Okay.
Something like that. I mean, we can just like tell it like the terminal to just like kick out like whatever the terminal spits out into a file.
Yeah, I kept trying it because I did like the select star from actors and then the right thing, and then it was like the name and then .txt or .csv or whatever, and I was trying to follow it, but it wasn't working for me.
Yeah, so the best thing to do actually is to use this. So I'm gonna do and let's see, what is my path here? So I'm gonna cheat just a little bit. So I'm just going to dump this into my my downloads. So I just say into out file, kind of give it where I want. Fields terminated by, and we're going to do a CSV. So we'll do a comma and enclosed by, and let's do those in double quotes. And then lines terminated by a new line.
Okay.
Oh, so
have a typo somewhere.
Well, it's actually just like, looks like I have it set to secure, so it won't let me like export the data essentially, which is interesting. Anyway, so yeah, we could disable that. In my, that's a great question though. In my, so this is just as pretty easy, just turn it off. I just have to turn it off, change the setting and turn it back on. But in here, what's interesting is because we can download it here pretty easy. So like, we select it here, I can actually just click this and say, oh, I want to save this as a CSV2 actors. Put it in downloads. There we go. And there is my actors. So, for whatever reason, it's just blocking it on the command line, but we could fix that pretty easy. In fact, I wonder if we can do it.
Yes, where the command line would be more blocked than the GUI.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. Yeah, really surprising. It's probably just a matter of like, because the command line is using like the actual software, so to speak. So, anyways, yeah, we could turn that off pretty easy, I think. Anyways, but yeah, great question. But they do have the way to do it with this little file thing.
Yeah, I get the idea behind it. So, because I was just thinking, if you're going to do this real world, you'd want to probably throw it to Excel or text or something, to do something with it.
Yep.
The other question, so like, I know if you hit the up arrow, I notice it brings back the last line. Is there any way that you can bring back the whole entire thing? So if you have a typo, you don't have to go one line, then down one line, then down one line.
Yeah, and that's a great question. The answer is no, unless you type it all in on one line. So that's another reason. Like even me, day to day, I use the GUI for that very reason. Because it's just a huge pain. So even what I do a lot of times is I'll type it up in like Visual Studio Code and then just paste it in because it's just easier.
So your one line can be as big as you want, really. It doesn't care.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Okay. It's just looking, make sure you did no return. If you did, it puts in a little arrow so then it knows it's a separate line.
Yep. Great questions.
Yeah, the command line seems to be faster, I think. I mean, it's super quick.
Yeah. Then that's like what I think you'll find is in my experience, it really is just like a matter of preference and in kind of depending on what I'm doing. Because I'll often just like jump on to a server, because I rarely have like MySQL just like running on a computer. So I'll frequently just like jump on and do things like most time, like if I'm like exporting data, that kind of stuff. I do like in a GUI, but like if I'm just doing like quick like fixes, I find it easier just to jump straight into a command prompt, to be honest. But that's because I know exactly what I'm doing, and so obviously it's a learning curve. So everyone should just feel free to use what you want.
So this is Amy. I've dropped off my kids. I'm back at my computer. Can I just share my screen really quick to show you what I see?
Yeah. Let me. Does anyone else have any questions about content? Because I can let everyone else go, and then we can start troubleshooting. Does anyone else have any questions? And people feel free to stick around if you're having similar issues or just want to hang out. But does anyone else have any questions about content this week or anything? All right, I'll take that as a no. So anyways, I'll be posting this video either tonight or tomorrow at some point. If you want to come back, rewatch it. But yeah, if you have any questions, any issues getting set up and installed, feel free to shoot me a note on Teams. And anyways, yeah, good luck this week, and we'll talk soon.